Russia invades Ukraine. The war is underway, and baseball's lockout lingers. Diamond Diehards is on. Joe Rizzo here bringing you baseball along with the dog, Jeff Healy. Somber times because I think that most, if not all of us, are we've put the baseball lockout in the back window. Even those of us who take it quite seriously, and that's because of what's going on with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a war being, televised and brought to us practically by the minute here. We will get more into that and try to add a little bit of perspective around what a baseball lockout means while a war is going on. It's not going on probably in the places where most of you are listening and fortunate enough to be free enough to just be able to watch a podcast on Facebook or YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts without worrying about bombs flying over your head, or if your credit card's going to work, or to pay your food bill. Um, and as you know, if you've listened to the show, we take seriously the military around the world, not just here in the U.S. or in Canada, but around the world, because we do Veteran of the Day, and Dawg is our Veteran of the Day emeritus, having served in the U.S. Army. Um, and we're going to talk a little bit about what this war means, just in terms of perspective. Dawg has some good knowledge from his day job about how the energy sector and politics intersect across the globe, and that's kind of one of the things that's front and center here as well. And we'll try to juxtapose this a little bit with what's going on with the lockout, which certainly seems like um, something that would appear trivial. Like, are they going to end this war practically before they end the lockout? I mean, there's going to be peace talks apparently in Belarus between Ukrainian and Russian brass. And as we conduct this podcast, the MLB side is meeting with the MLB Players Association brass, and it just seems silly that they couldn't reconcile their differences when something much more serious is going on the other side of the globe. So a little bit of a sober and unusual start to this one. Usually we're kind of jovial and trying to get you up into it and excited, but it's a Sunday, February 27th, and this is just the way we're going to do this one today. So I will, as always, gratefully and dutifully introduce my wonderful co-host, the dog, Jeff Healy, who will bring us Veteran of the Day. Dog?
Hi, Chris. This one's a little different. Again, kind of in keeping with the mode of the show overall that we have for tonight. This one to me was a no-brainer. For me, most of the time I'm kind of hunting around and trying to get a little baseball and military angle kind of put together for the show or whatnot. But the one that really jumped out to me was the Ukrainian border guards, and in particular, quite a heroic stand that was highlighted by the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, that a small group of Ukrainian border guards on this sort of nothing little island in the Black Sea called Snake Island off the coast of Ukraine. So the Ukrainian Navy is very, very small, only a frigate or two or so, trivial next to the size of the Russian Navy, not an impact and whatnot. So pretty much the Russian Navy can kind of come in and do whatever they want to do at will against the Ukrainian Navy. So these border guards are on this, like a little island. It's got like a lighthouse and like a research facility or something like that. Again, and sort of just a little spit of land out in the ocean. And they were radioed by a Russian frigate saying, "Hey, it's time for you to give up. We have you outgunned. You can't do anything. You have small arms. You can't do anything against a warship or whatnot." surrender. We don't need to kill you. Let's just wrap this up, whatever. And the Ukrainians responded in pretty blunt fashion back of like, we're not surrendering anything. Um, and eventually it took the Russian warship and potentially aircraft as well, attacking their buildings, destroying their buildings, and so forth, to finally put down the Ukrainian resistance against the Russian forces. So reported originally reported all killed. Now there's some rumors now that some of them may have been captured along the way. So we don't know as of the time of recording which way that is. Regardless, they're a casualty. And the thing we really want to highlight is just the bravery of that, right? So if you're an army guy with an AK-47 and there's a warship off their shore, you can't hit the warship. You don't have the range to do that or anything. You're pretty much at their mercy. And the bravery that the Ukrainian border guards showed in holding on to that island and basically inviting their death, whether or not that actually happened or not yet TBD. But the bravery that they showed was really a remarkable act of bravery and heroism, highlighted by the by the Ukrainian president, and wound up being the heroes of, getting awarded the Ukraine's highest medal, the heroes of Ukraine, for their courageous stand against the Russian invaders. And for that, we'd like to recognize the Ukrainian border guards on Snake Island as our veteran of the day.
So, an interesting start here, Dawg. We've had some shows where we've taken, more serious tact. We started out with Veteran of the Day, and this is the rundown. Perspective, war in the Ukraine, lockout meetings taking place. Which ends first, the war or the lockout, and then Diehard Dads at the end. Maybe we can leave on a better note.
Yuck it up a little.
Hopefully. Perspective, Dawg. I mean, listen, I, you're in meetings, right? And you're trying to hammer out a deal, and you have to just understand, like, that people feel that you have a chance to look really bad and do really lasting damage to your sport if you just can't say, hey, you know what? This is kind of like a wake up call. These people are at war. They're being attacked. And, for no good reason that really anybody else can see besides the Russian leader. And, like, baseball's so trivial, right? Like, how could they just not be in that room? And hopefully that's what's happening literally now as we speak on the evening of February 27th. Hopefully that's what's going on in the room, and that cooler heads are saying, look, let's just figure it out. Like, all we have to do is turn on the news, like, at practically any channel at any time. The news stations, so-called, are going like 24/7 still with this. You see people, that are the regular weeknight anchors or weekday anchors on the weekends. You're seeing them at times when it's usually just filler. It's serious, sobering stuff, and the owners especially, and then there is culpability to the players as well. Like, they have a chance to really look bad here if they can't just iron this thing out. And we're heading into this deadline where apparently by, what is it, March 1st, if they can't have a deal hammered out, the ownership has said that that's the drop dead date to start the season on time. You and I have talked about it, and we both feel, I believe, that if it ended up starting April 15th, Jackie Robinson Day, that all would not be lost, and you'd be a week or two into games, and people would start to forget about a little bit of the labor strife. I don't know, Dawg. I don't know if I still believe that now because of what's happened. Like, I don't think either of us really thought and you know better than I, but I really didn't expect this war to actually happen. And while I'm kind of in disbelief every time I turn on the TV, I'm also like kind of not, right? But it definitely gives you, if you're paying attention, it just gives you perspective on how lucky you are to live the life that you're living, if you're here in the U.S.
Yeah. I will say I have actually thought that this war was coming for a while. Unfortunately, um, I think particularly as Putin kind of continued to double down and increase his forces on the border, I think he kind of painted himself into as I put it, a lose-lose situation. He sort of backs off and says, "I'm not going to invade," or he's pretty much got to take over the country, right? I mean, if you put pretty much your entire deployable military on the border, and you're trying to push for something, at some point, you've got to take the country over or get something really meaningful out of it, or why did you bother, right? Why'd you do this? Are you doing this to take two towns, right? That kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, and get your country sanctioned and everything else like that. And um, so that's been a disappointment. I mean, the reach over to baseball and the owners and the players. I'm actually getting sort of I'm getting a little bummed out too. I'm been surprised at how long this is sort of dragged on. And I do agree that as bigger issues are going on in the world, that again it just makes billionaires fighting against millionaires seem more and more trivial. Like why am I sitting there like dealing with this one's arguing over this guy should get paid 200,000 versus 300,000 or whatever else? Like it just doesn't resonate with people at this point. And like at some point, like you're saying, like we've had bigger issues, right? We got COVID, we got Russian nuclear forces on alert. Like I don't really need to hear about like, oh, there's not enough guys getting Super 2 status. I'm like, who cares at some point? And that's sort of my bigger worry on it, is that the more times you go down that road, um the more times people just be like, I just don't care, and that's what really sort of hurts. Again, to kind of get down to a downer, but like like my kids don't care, unfortunately, right? They don't care if the Mets season starts on time. They're Met fans, they'd like to see it, but like they don't, they're not diehards, and we've already had that problem, right? And just the more times you go down this road of just ticking people off and ticking fans off and just making it less attractive for um to capture the eyeballs of the next generation, the harder and harder it gets. Like the more expensive it is to go to a game, the less games you're having on there. They're all scheduled for prime time, so you can't bring a family to it. You just make it harder and harder and harder for you to grow the next generation of that market. I think they're really squeezing the blood out of the onion right now of trying to get all the money now, and I think it's going to blow up on them over time. Like I said, like my guys sit there and play video games, right? They'll do that all day. Some e-games may take, you fast forward 20 years. If you told me e-games would blew away MLB revenues 20 years from now, that wouldn't surprise me. Not at all, right? I'll be the guy still watching. Like I'll still out there watching like Jacob deGrom Jr. pitch for the Mets, and I'll have a great old time, whatever, right? But like my kid's not gonna, and he's certainly not gonna take his kids there, right? So I don't know. I'm all bummed out. I was feeling okay on the war. I'm like, now you got me talking baseball, and I'm actually more depressed about baseball than I am about the war.
Well, at least in 20 years, Max Scherzer will still probably be pitching.
Yeah, I hope so. Still for the Mets.
Probably.
Can I ever see Max Scherzer for the Mets? I felt like I'm Max Scherzer, and I can't. Now he can't pitch.
Yeah,
that's
so
classic. I'm convinced this is a conspiracy against going. By the way, so.
Oh, the lockout thing could be.
No, exactly. That's why they're sticking this all up. Cohen's like, I'll buy it all. I don't care. I'll pay him whatever. No, someone not gonna have a season.
Well, it's apparently he a lot of the other owners got red-assed over that, and they want to shut him down. So
Could be.
First he gets shut down by former Mayor Bill de Blasio, and that kind of punts it off. It was about 9 months more it took, yep. And now the other owners, like the guy's a fan. The guy's an owner that really should be good for the game, right? Yep. Like the guy's actually a fan. And he owns the team, and he tweets,
in like one of the biggest media markets, right?
Yeah, and like that's the guy that you want to push away. I mean, come on,
yeah,
come on.
yeah.
So this the whole war thing, you know, we always want to try to like draw a little line back to baseball, and I think we've kind of done that already. But when you talk about the effects of what it could have on, um, you know, the people that are involved in the two countries, which are, Ukraine, which is being invaded, and Russia, which is forced to swallow the pill of being the invaders when it just doesn't seem like a war that's backed very well by the minds of the people that occupy that country as its rightful citizens. Did I say that in a good way? Um,
So
so it
they're
just
not they're
seems.
not sure why they're attacking their brother right now.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's
that
fair to say.
yeah, and there might be some people that back it. We're not seeing any of that kind of coverage here, none.
I'm not sure there's a lot of that exists.
And
I'll be
and the
honest.
whole the
Yeah.
whole world has kind of turned. And listen, that's like the news networks are always trying to keep you scared, right? Because that's how they keep their ratings up. And the other side's always doing this and that. But let's face it, if you're not on alert and this hasn't pricked up your antennas, then you're living a pretty good, comfortable life because there's a good chance that stuff can really go down here that would affect us over here. Baseball notwithstanding, right? Like that would be the last of our worries, whether there was baseball or not. I mean, we would maybe hope that there is to kind of get our mind off of what was going on, but things like let's try to draw the dotted line, right? The thing that's most likely to happen as a result of any kind of war here, if it drags out at all, as far as the U.S. is concerned, is that our prices and the inflation, I figure, would continue a rise, and perhaps it would become meteoric with regard to the cost of energy. Now, as it happens in real life, Dawg knows a lot about energy and how the markets work and with regard to politics and that. So if that's driving up costs there, right, then you're paying, twice as much for milk and meat because of, whatever reason. And shelves are not stocked as much because energy is less available. So trucking, airline, those industries are getting slowed down, any of the shipping industries. Um, and that would mean that if you're spending more on that, you're certainly less concerned about baseball and you're really less concerned about actually spending the money and going to the games. So if there is a lockout and that is persisting, I mean, it could be a disastrous confluence of events for that kind of business. So as a business, I think you have to be wise to it. And if you look at baseball as a business, they ought to be wise to it as well. What are the key things in terms of the energy part of this war, Dawg? Like, if you could try to give a
Sure.
summary or a capsule explanation of what it really means.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what you've seen as COVID's rebounded, you've seen a drop in some of the U.S. energy production. So some of it has been shut in and has not come back, as drilling has not come back as strongly as it was prior to COVID. You've seen supply chain disruptions. There's actually supply chain disruptions as people are shifting from sourcing from China to sourcing from other countries, and just not being able to source from China, period. I would say that's actually probably had more of a permanent impact on inflation. It's sort of a reverse of the globalization that you saw back in the late 90s, early 2000s when China joined WTO. A lot of Western manufacturing went to China. You kind of had like an inflation holiday, right? We're also like it's like going to Walmart, right? And like the everyday low prices stuff. Like everyday low prices came from China, right? Instead of being made in Ohio, it's now made in China, right? So you had all that coming through. Prices magically dropped, or at least magically didn't increase. You're starting to see some of the reverse of that, right? Where supply chains have gotten disrupted, and you're also seeing some onshoring as stuff has come back to the U.S. and back to other Western democracies. So I think there's that sort of impact. I think in terms of energy, the U.S. has been somewhat shielded because of fracking that has produced a lot of natural gas production that has been very beneficial for both the consumer, on the order of like trillions of dollars a year, or a trillion a year to the economy. So a huge benefit from having low natural gas prices, versus the rest of the world where it's priced more in line with oil, at least to 2 to 3 times the price of energy. So the U.S. hasn't really felt the pinch. Europe has been hammered by it. Uh, Asia and Europe have been hammered by it. The U.S. has been somewhat insulated. So you've seen some increase in gasoline prices, but you haven't seen the broader impact on like power prices and so forth yet. And again, that's really due to the U.S. producers producing much more U.S. natural gas. In terms of, do I think it's like a runaway for the U.S.? Uh, I don't think it's going to be a runaway, but I think it's going to be sort of persistently higher than we've had for a long time. And the problem with inflation is the bad spirals in inflation become when people's expectations are the price is going to be higher tomorrow than today. And then you hike the prices in advance of that, and it starts to turn into a spiral. So we've had a downward spiral in prices really from, let's call it, the late 90s to probably COVID, frankly. And now you're starting to see a reverse of that. And it's interesting because a lot of market participants don't as much of this up here and don't remember inflation, right? I mean, most of the time they're 30-year-old kids who never don't even know what the hell inflation is.
By the
So
way, no, let's just note for those
sorry.
not watching that Dawg, when he said they don't have a lot of this up there, he was tugging on his gray hair, and if he had a gray beard, he'd be tugging on that.
Exactly.
He's saying
Exactly.
a lot of miles on the chassis. That's
Exactly.
what Dawg means. Lived
Exactly.
a lot, lived long enough to remember
Right.
gas lines in the U.S. Right?
Correct. Yes.
And if
So
you I mean, in that lifetime, the closest thing maybe that some people have seen is when there have been storms like Sandy in the Northeast, and some of the storms that happened in the Gulf, where all of a sudden there's like these expected shortages and massive gas lines. I mean, that's something that you're saying could become on the regular, perhaps in one of the worst scenarios here.
in some of the worst scenarios, you could see that. And for Europe specifically, where that's sort of tied back to Russia, Ukraine, where it gets more pointed, is that Europe has pursued a very green agenda, sort of very much pushing of shutting down coal, shutting down nuclear, which is actually zero carbon emitting, which is, to me, it doesn't really make sense with what their green aspirations are. Um, and then push much more for offshore wind and also Russian natural gas. So upwards of 60 to 70% of Germany's energy needs are met through Russian energy imports. Um, so the former German chancellor, just I believe a week or two ago, was placed on the board of Gazprom, which is one of the largest Russian energy companies. So I'm talking about like not reading the room at that point. Um, just terrible energy policy put in effect. And I think that's a real wake up call to the rest of Europe and should be to the rest of the U.S. as well. That the push for renewable energy is noble and has a place, but the technology has not reached what the rhetoric has pushed, and it puts your country ultimately can put your country in a very dangerous situation where your national security needs are being subsumed to your energy needs, right? So you might want to oppose Russia taking over a country, but if Russia is heating your houses, you have to act differently than if you were independent of that. And I think Europe is waking up to that. The U.S. is in a much stronger position than they are in terms of that. But inevitably, that price is coming out of either their governments or their public, and it's a real negative for both national security and for overall economic well-being.
So if Uncle Paul's sitting here saying, "Wow, I love Dog. I love to listen to him, and I like to hear him talk baseball, but I don't remember what his qualifications are to start talking to me about energy," and he's getting up in arms and saying, "Wait, I don't agree with what he's saying." Um,
Join the
could you
club.
give us just a could you just give everybody like a quick background? You know, you don't have to like name
What do I do?
companies or anything like that, but just from your experience
What do I
and
do and stuff on it? Yeah.
yeah, like
So I've
how you got there, how you got to
yeah,
that.
so I've got, oh God, a long time. I don't know, 2 to 3 decades of experience at this point in the energy market specifically. Now I analyze utility and pipeline companies. I've also done upstream oil and gas companies as well, refining, et cetera, things like that. For again, the better part of like 2 to 3 decades at this point, across different insurance companies that invest in those sorts of companies. So pretty deep experience in that. Some economics and obviously from school and so forth, starting with that. But yeah, a lot of industry experience within within energy and utilities broadly.
Do you have a take in in it financially to support one side or the other with your message? How about that?
Yeah, would have a conflicting on it. As a utility analyst, I would say I don't care. As a utility, they get paid to give you the electricity. So however it gets generated, it gets generated. So if you want my companies to build a boatload of windmills in the ocean, we can build windmills in the ocean and it's going to cost you 4 times as much, and we can do that and put that out there for you. So I would say in terms of that, no. Midstream, it's a little bit tilted towards continuing U.S. Oil and natural gas production. So there's some incentive towards that. Um, at times, they're more incented to not grow their production, and the more they don't drill, it's actually better for me as a credit analyst that there's more money for them to repay us. So I don't really have a burning thing one way or the other, whether or not they grow production or don't grow production, as long as they do it in a prudent fashion to their balance sheet. Um, but it's really more, I think even actually across the energy industry, they're actually much more national security and national interest focused than your average company. Like these folks are generally, like I would say, in oil and natural gas and utilities in general. They want to see everybody do well. And if everyone's not doing well, it's not ultimately going to be good for their business. So so yeah, oil prices at 120 is great for a while, but it's not great in the long term. I would say anybody within oil and gas would say that, particularly companies that are larger and more focused on the long term.
And it did drop, right? It dropped about $29 or something, or $30 in the week, right? Where after it hit a high kind of early, and then it was down by like the
So
end of
I
the
would
week
say
to
probably
like
about
$91 a barrel.
yeah, probably about $8 or so from WTI was getting close to 100, didn't quite get over 100. Brent, which is the one from London, so that's based off the European price, so it's a little bit higher than WTI. That broke over 100 right as Russia was invading, and that's come down to kind of 92, 93 or so at this point. So that's come off a little bit. So it's about a 10% move, which is pretty significant. Um, Again, the sort of worry is that we're in sort of a tight environment already, and by that I mean that supply is a little bit less than demand really needs. So we've been eating into inventory along the way. So there's just there's more there's more demand for baseball than there's supply of baseball, as we gotta say on there, right? So that's kind of where the oil market is right now as well. So eventually those two have to meet. Either you have to grow supply or you got to crush demand. So that's what higher oil prices will do. They're incent people to drill more, or if you prevent them from drilling more, people are going to drive less because you can't afford it,
And ship less or ship
or ship
more.
less. And
Or,
that's to your point, that's where it gets bad. Is that, and again, that's why energy is really a national security issue, right? Is that it spills over. If the price of the iPhone is high, that affects the iPhone sales, and that affects tech, a little bit of the consumer or whatnot. But when energy prices are high, that gets incorporated into everything that moves, and it becomes very, very, as we say, sticky right? Where the price goes up, like a UPS surcharge, right, on fuel. Does that come down? Not very often, right? So that extra buck goes on there and never goes away. And that becomes part of permanent inflation, which is bad for everybody.
Permaflation,
Permaflation. There we
like
go.
permafrost,
There you
which hopefully will melt on
go. Hopefully, I'll slide down the ice all this weekend.
yeah. Yeah, and you live to tell about it. I'm surprised
And
you.
I did
Thank
barely.
thankfully you're still up at 9:22 on a Sunday after being with the scouts all weekend camping. So
That's
I
right.
do appreciate
I got
that.
I got I got my helmet from Germany, I guess. They didn't send to Ukraine in time, so
Yeah. Um.
Gerhardt.
And so of course, like in the rundown, the one thing we didn't write was Dog Talks Energy. It's like the best part. Like literally, this is like one of the best segments that we've had because that's really educational, even for me. Like, I mean, listen, we've been friends for a million years. I know what you do, and yet I'm still kind of like putting you. I'm like, geez, I'm about to put Dog on the spot here. Do you have do you have a vested interest in your opinion? And like, kind of hoping that like usually we like to give softball questions on the baseball podcast. I'm like, I think I'm throwing Dog like a little bit of a curve and a change up here, but hopefully he gets a piece. And good, you did lined a nice sharp single to center, got the knob of the bat down,
Not for the
got the
ball.
got the bat through the zone, made contact.
No HLP here.
No,
Not
no,
hits through the originator.
yeah. And if I asked you that question and you were like, yeah, I kind of do, I would have been like, okay, Tragic Ron, on to the next segment.
Tragic Dog.
Tragic Dog. Yeah, a very interesting way to put things there. To get. I mean, I feel educated, and like we talk offline about this stuff all the time. Sometimes me and you, sometimes in groups, but I think it's good stuff. I mean, this is kind of a valuable segment you might not expect on a podcast like Diamond Diehards, but as I
There
like
you
to
go.
say, this is one of the things that I think sets us apart. We've started to take on some of these, more difficult topics that a lot of podcasts would really steer away from. And, we're not claiming to be like the foremost experts in the field, but like we're in a spot where Dog has quite a bit of expertise and he's willing to sum things up and take that expertise and form it into a little bit of an opinion and then be eloquent enough to deliver it. So good job on that, Doggy. Good job. Now, let's focus for this segment here on the actual lockout. So this is a big day because it seems like, despite all the strife and consternation, that they've really decided to not be at loggerheads and just keep meeting session after session after session and getting to the table. Now, was it inspired by the events across the Atlantic? I don't know. Um, I would like to think that there was some of that going on, and that's kind of driving people to say, "Hey, let's just stay at this thing until we get it done," and no, that nobody's looking to screw over anybody else, and that we could walk out of here both getting mostly what we want. Um, the thing is, Dog, it's still like, even with the reporting, it's still, if you ask the average fan, what the owners want and what the players want, the average fan has no idea what either side wants. And then you ask the diehard fan, and the best they could do is, I think maybe I know, but I'm not really sure. That's kind of a problem, right?
Yeah, it's I thought it was rather adult of both sides going into it, that they were trying to keep it out of the media and sort of keep it and in general that tends to keep the temperature down, right? And you're not negotiating against people screaming to the media and so forth. So it normally sort of sets up that it's going to be a better negotiation, that'll just be two rational people sitting there discussing it behind closed doors and making deals and not having to like fight their way through the media and whatnot. But the longer it's kind of gone on, it just feels like they're just arguing just to argue. And they're not interested in, growing the whole pie and both sides winning, and maybe I get a little bit more, you get a little bit less of the growth, but it's all going to be a positive for us in general, and we sort of figure out how it goes going forward. It just really feels like this time, really both sides want the other side to lose, and I have a feeling almost more. Again, just from the outside, it feels more like the players are more pissed off that they want to just slap an L on the owners, whether or not it's even rational for both sides. And it's tough for me to kind of shake that. And I want to empathize with the players, but the fact that I don't really know what they're arguing about makes it hard to follow, and hard to kind of root for one side versus the other on that one.
Well, so we started talking about this in our pre-show meeting, and I was like, I think I have a rebuttal to that, but I'm going to save it for the show. So Doug hasn't heard it yet. I think the reason just is actually more simple than anything. I think the players union just feels bitter about it because the owners were the one who initiated the lockout, and there didn't really seem to be any real good reason to do it. There was no outstanding issue that was there. That was the one golden thing that you were like, okay, we got to dig in and fight because this is going to change, our business for the length of the careers of most of the players that are going to be involved on the MLB PA side, right? And might affect the way a lot of the owners do business for the length of their involvement in their ownership, right? Because sometimes these deals can last decades if they're good, right? If the structure is good, they just keep renewing these deals, and that's a great way to do business, right? Because then you've grown the pie and everybody's getting a piece of it and they're all happy. But there's not that one issue, and we just illustrated it with what we said. Like, and you turn on any uh, of the top reporters, whether they're on videos on TV or you're consuming the content through newspapers or online, like you, Dog, and I always have up the Athletic. I think practically every time when we're doing this show, we have the Athletic MLB page up, and we're looking at it now. And players make package offer to MLB as deadline to start regular season on time looms. That's according to a source. MLB, MLBPA make progress on draft lottery. Spring training games canceled through March 7th. We kind of knew that. If MLB CBA deal not done by February 28th, regular season games will be canceled, league says. So these are the kind of things that are there, but it's not like owners digging in to make sure that salary cap will be implored, willing to give up season in order to do so, right? Like that would kind of make sense where you're like, okay, they really want the salary cap. They want to change the structure of the game like MLB has not done compared to the NHL and compared to the NBA, right? Um, and of course, like the NFL being right the prime example of that. But baseball's a regional game, and when it's like the NFL at this thing, um, all the teams seem to have the same vested interest now. Whereas in baseball, it's like, you know, the Pirates owner wants to throw he wants to throw a wrench in Steve Cohen's spokes, right? A little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, we sort of talked about in the past, right? Is how much are you negotiating big owners versus small owners, and um, more experienced players versus the younger players and the minor leaguers and whatnot coming into the system and whatnot. And the more sides you get involved in the negotiation, the harder and harder it gets. Um, like you're saying, like if you were negotiating, like, is there a salary cap? Yes or no? Right? That's a harder question than they're sitting there talking about, like, does it grow from 208 to 215 or to 225. I mean, at some point, who cares? Right. I mean, it's somewhat, it's, for them, it's somewhat trivial in the grand scheme. Right. And, minimum players for salaries coming up for the young guys coming in and whatnot. I mean, that's sort of one that should be kind of a no-brainer for everybody. Like, who's really flipping out over the minimum salary being 650 versus 850 or something like that? Who cares? All right. I mean, why are you giving up games? Why are you poisoning your brand over something like this? When you're talking billions and you're talking 100,000 for somebody, it's trivial. And there's no reason in the world to continue on with that. And again, it just gets down to, the animosity. And again, it sort of felt like to me that the players are just pissed that they felt they didn't get enough. I mean, I don't know exactly what they gave up or what they lost in the last time, but maybe they felt they didn't gain enough and baseball owners gained more. Okay, I mean, that's fair. But they're flipping out over it. It's like, we're gonna shut down the league. I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what exactly have the players haven't given up anything, frankly. Right? It's just a question of how much of the slice they want to get. Like, they're arguing from like, our minimum salary instead of 650 should be 850, and the owners are saying it should be 750. I mean, they're not saying we'll take 550, right? It's like there's stuff that's going back that way along the way. So again, it kind of makes it hard of like, exactly what are you so pissed off about this? That like everything you have is growing. And I mean, we'll just divorce it from like reality of everybody else. Like, where, $100,000 raise, like, is someone's like, multi years might be that. And that's like just a rounding error for, a minor, the 21-year-old makes that instead of the being 22 when he makes that. Right. I mean, it's mind blowing to anybody else.
I think,
That,
Dog,
go ahead.
I think it's actually, maybe we're onto something here. My mindset has been, what is that one big domino that needs to fall that's going to start knocking the other dominoes down? And you know what? I think I'm coming to the realization, Dog. It's not a domino row. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why it hasn't been solved quickly, because each thing is a small issue that's being made into a bigger issue. And there's not that one big thing that one side's looking for that, hey, if we get this solved, okay, we'll just figure out the details on the other one. It's like every little piece, every yard that we're trying to gain here is going to be meaningful to each side. But I think I think that the owners are united on one thing, that they were willing to, and that is that they were willing to lock out the players. But I don't think the owners are very united in terms of what they want across the board, and it's a little ambiguous. So I think that I think that's one of the reasons why they haven't been good in terms of getting their proposals and turning them around, because the Pirates' interests and the Orioles' interests and the Royals' interests are so different from the Yankees' interests and the Red Sox' interests and the Mets' interests and the Dodgers' interests. And then, everybody else kind of falls in different categories somewhere in between. Yeah, okay, maybe I left out a few there, but you get the point, right? You get the point.
Well,
so
or big owner.
they're trying to chop down a forest of trees, but they only have one axe. That's kind of what it looks like to me. And they got to keep getting through these trees, and they got to, the more stuff that they agree on and get off the table, the easier it's going to be for them to build momentum and continue on. Why? Because you're in a negotiation, you start to understand, and compromise usually breeds what, Dog? More compromise, right? And then more compromise that's in effect, usually in the end, both sides end up feeling not as great as they want to feel, but better than they would have felt, and pretty good overall, right?
Yeah. And again, I think it's self-destructive, like, all around. And I think it's just bad for business. And, I think former players that, we talked to and stuff, Manfred doesn't seem to get it, right? From the commissioner side, and speaking for the owners and whatnot, that, I will say their side as well, doesn't seem to get, again, sort of the forest for the trees. The fact that, like, you're just pissing people off, and 10 years from now, that fan base is going to be here. Like, if this is hard now, fast forward 10 years when the pie is shrinking, right? And then what does this look like? It's a disaster then, right? Now you're talking about, like, oh, by the way, now the salary cap has to go down, right? Wait till that conversation starts to happen. The first
Well,
time that
or the
happens.
salary cap actually has to be instituted,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the whatever
Yeah,
the
exactly.
luxury tax threshold
Flat.
goes
You
down.
thou shalt not, right? Versus, like, I'll just pay a little bit more for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very very destructive to it, and that's what I worry on that. Again, there's sort of like a pox on your house on both sides. I think you had a great point on, like, the trees and then one axe, right? It's like everyone is like, it's like fighting with every kid over eating your peas, right? It's like everything is like just like a knockout drag out. I'm like, Super 2, like, why are we talking about Super 2? Right? I mean, of all the things, I'm like, that's not a real needle mover in this sort of industry. It's not that big of a deal.
It's like,
Right?
yeah, it's like, ladies, gentlemen, three of you go into a room and just figure that one out. Okay, come back with a solution, and we're gonna take whatever you people.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, trying to figure out how to reward guys who are doing well for you and stuff like that. Again, that seems like a fairly easy compromise to happen out there. And the fact that the both sides are still sort of like kicking and screaming on it. Like, we're past kicking and screaming time. Like, we need to make substantial moves. And again, I think in yours, like, you need to kind of tie some of those together, in my opinion. Like, you can't just make it where, like, everyone's a fight over everyone. It's like, you know what, owners, let's stop being jerks on. Let's give a little bit on the Super 2, and let's put a little bit more teeth maybe into, exceeding the salary caps or something like that, or what the rate of growth is on the salary cap. The salary cap, I think, is the big domino, I think, for the owners, and I think for the players as well, is my speculation. And they're just like teasing around with it. So I don't know if they're planning on pulling out a magical agreement at some point, but, like, they're not even seriously negotiating, it feels like, on the salary cap, versus with the real money is involved. And I'm not sure how you do that in a day after you've been sitting there, like, basically putting it off for like 3 or 4 months. So it's discouraging. It's discouraging. It's brand destroying for the entire sport. And I think that's what pisses off a lot of the former players and just everyone around, and players and fans and whatever else, that anyone who's interested in the longevity of the sport realize that this is just a really idiotic thing. And the fact that we've even gotten this close and are really talking about postponing opening day, again, pandemic, wars, everything else like that. Why am I sitting there screwing around over whether the salary cap is 215 versus 220? Really? I mean, that's why you're going to shut down the damn sport, is arguing over 215 or 220. It's crazy. Both sides. It's crazy.
And just to be clear, when you say the salary cap, you really mean that luxury tax threshold?
Yes, exactly.
Is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Just that's
terminology.
It's clear to
yes,
me, but
true.
Terminology. Words matter.
Yeah.
Words
do
matter.
matter. I might have been reading a little bit about the Giants. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the football
Speaking
Giants.
of salary cap problems.
The football Giants, that is, not the
exactly, not the old school.
Not the baseball Giants, right?
Gil Hodges.
It's hard. It's hard to harken
Finally in the
back.
hall.
hard to harken back that the Giants led the majors in wins, right? Seems like forever ago. It was like 3 months ago, right? I mean, we're like, oh, pitchers and catchers, but there's going to be a lockout. Now here we are, right? And it's almost March, and we don't have spring training. We have minor leaguers doing some stuff, right?
Yeah.
We saw our buddy Calvin Ziegler getting some airtime on SNY in the Met system there. I heard our pal Mike Puma's voice. I'm like, those voices and those faces have graced our ether waves. Is that a good one? Ether waves? Are there waves? Yeah. Ether, our ether. They've been across our ether before, and hopefully we'll get them on again sometime soon. We're gonna have this is a Sunday, so it's the first day of the week, and this will be a 2-show week. And on Thursday, our pal Jeff Fry will come on, and Shigon Nation, he will be making his second appearance on the show,
Yep.
And I sense that we'll maybe talk a little bit about the lockout stuff. We'll probably talk a lot about Rob Manfred and his decisions, and we'll talk probably. It'll be nice and old school. Like we'll talk about hitting and styles and techniques and the hitting gurus and what they're trying to do or not do, and what Jeff is doing and trying to, run up support for, taking some of the geeks out of the higher position, as he would like to say, higher positions in baseball instruction, and getting it back to the point where there's something called a hit and run, and it actually matters, and putting the bat on the ball, and forgetting about like so much of these launch angles and striking out and some of these things that we've seen that have infiltrated the game and taken the floor out of the bottom of batting averages, because it's a stat that some wave of baseball analytics people think is basically a useless or an overblown stat. So we'll get into all that stuff on our next show. But the last part of this segment before Diehard Dads is which ends first, the war or the lockout. And to be honest with you, I'm actually embarrassed in a way that we have to even put it there. But if I feel like we're putting the baseball people on blast in our own little corner of the universe here. We're putting them on blast because the fact that we even have to ask that question, and the fact that, like, honestly, it's really just a pure guess at this point. Like, there's no question the lockout should end first. I could say that. There's no question that it should end first.
It should be going on right now.
Right. There's no question it should end first, but which will end first, Dawg?
I think the war will. I think the war will wrap up this week, frankly. Knock wood, God willing. And I think Russia's going to realize that they just bit off more than they could chew.
And they've
got to come sort of political deal and go back between the tail between their legs.
They literally have the whole world against them.
Yeah,
the world hasn't united like this in a while.
No, not like forever.
What was it? Was it your tweet where you were like, boy, you got to really be an asshole if you have Denmark and Sweden sending...
Denmark is sending anti-tank rockets to go kill you. There might be a sign maybe you're doing the wrong thing. You got IKEA coming after you in Sweden.
That's like, those... Not good. You just don't see those countries like making any kind of actions like this, and even Germany's doing stuff. I mean, that's like against their treaties and things like that. I'm gonna just pray that they both end by the time the show is over. I can't not say I think the lockout will end first. Like I just, like, as a I don't know, I guess as a human, I don't know which would be, I mean, it would be way better. Like, if I had to ask like, if you asked me if I had a choice.
Your father Russ.
if I had a choice, which would end first, I'd immediately end the war. I would never start. I hate war. War, not a big war guy. Not a big war guy. But it would be better for the world, because that's actually something that means something if the war ended first. But I'm hoping that with perspective that the lockout is something that could end much more quickly, I would think. And because of that, I'm going to say the lockout ends, in the next couple of days from the time we're doing this, which is Sunday, February 27th. And I hope the war ends before that. But I guess for the sake of it, I kind of painted myself into a corner here, Dawg, didn't I? I kind of gave myself a shitty.
It does feel like the lockout could end. The lockout feels like it's either going to end the next day or two, or it could go for a month.
Right.
Versus the war is probably somewhere in the middle.
The war feels like it's gonna fizzle quickly, or what really scares me is that there is that powder keg potential where the the dictator is backed into a corner and he decides like that he's going to empty his arsenal and he's got people to do it for him that don't overtake him. That's a that
Hopefully not.
that
Hopefully not.
you know that's kind of the part that nobody's talking about. Uh, but that would be not good. That would be not good for anybody.
Like, bad for business.
Bad for
It gets
world.
bad for world.
Bad for world.
No.
Let's face it. Dawg would be activated.
Can't be deployed though. I did look that up. Can't be sent overseas against my will. Can answer the phone. That's all right. I'll get after the Russian bear. We kicked their ass once. We'll do it again.
Hopefully,
Prefer to hang at home and drink some wine instead, though.
hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Hopefully.
All right, now we try to make a saving turn with Diehard Dads. I always press the play button instead of the other thing. Okay. Thanks to producer Xavier, who hasn't showed up for work in about since before the lockout.
He's on lockout.
I think producer Xavier got locked out. Or no, he's on strike. He's definitely on strike. It's good because now I know he's not even listening. Although usually he is monitoring, but he's finished with break. So we had the kids on break for this week, and it was cool. Got to run around, do some stuff. Didn't go away. Most people go away, but like we did have a couple of Rockets hockey tournament. We had a tournament, and then we had the playoffs. So I got to do some of those games, the hockey stuff. That's on my other YouTube channel, Joe Rizzo Hockey or Joe Rizzo Rockets. You could look that stuff up if you really care. But it's always interesting, like the last day of break, right, where you're trying to say, gotta rustle them out of bed early. Got to make sure that, they're tired by like 9 o'clock so they could turn it around, go to bed. Got to make sure that like whatever homework they blew off for the whole week is done on time, right? And, I find out that there's something called oh my God, what the heck is it called? It's a tranquil week. Let's see if I could find it. There's I don't know. It's a week where they're supposed it's some kind of mellow week where they're not supposed to be given homework, at least two of them. So I'm like, yeah, but you should probably check anyway. And so I think at least two of them didn't have homework, and then the other one, we'll see. He's probably doing it right now, the producer. But interesting going back and forth. Got to go back and forth to Pennsylvania a couple of times here in the span of a few days because it was President's Day, so we went Saturday to Monday, and then we were back there for Friday overnight into Saturday. And it's funny, Dawg, like you before the show here, you were like, oh, I'm going out for like meeting, going out for a brew. I'm like, oh, good, that's good. If I don't go on these hockey trips, it's like I never go out for a brew with anybody. Like I'm just home. Like that's what I'm doing. So that's like my double thing, like as the dad who, like, I always have to go to the hockey games pretty much because I'm live streaming them and recording them and doing play-by-play. But it also helps me get in my little, my social excursions. And I think that counts as my Diehard Dads. That's because it's kind of a dad thing, right?
Exactly. There we go. Yeah, mine was kind of boring. I just had I had the boys this weekend, so we got to go out camping again. So we in a Boy Scout troop. So we had last time that Keegan was the senior patrol leader. So that was our big thing in there. So we got to make him work for his title. So he was in charge this weekend. So we went out to a new camp. We got to try that out, do some nice cooking. Dawg made some nice blueberry pancakes to order. So I had my blueberries and my chocolate chips. That was pretty spiffy. All the guys all the adults went with their blueberries, so we went with that. So it's quite tasty. So we had that. Actually, Kath helped make the batter for me, so it was pretty good. Put a little vanilla extract in. It was a good job by her. I was a little busy on Friday with the whole Ukraine and energy and whatever else thing going on. So she hooked me a salad on there, so that worked well. A little bacon that we pre heated as on Friday as well, and then some eggs to order. So that was pretty nice. Made like 10 eggs. So that was pretty good. And then made sausage and peppers, which was very nice for lunch. So we were trying to do like a fancy. We were doing cabin camping this time, so it's a little bit more, you're not hiking through and schlepping in the tents and everything else like that. So we get to, kind of chill out and make some bigger stuff. So we did some sausage and peppers and a nice grilled chicken for dinner. One of the other dads made as well. So that was
What do
so
you
that
what
was
do
a,
you
that
what
was
do
a
you
good
do
time.
about the picky eaters who are like, oh, I don't eat eggs, I don't eat sausage and peppers, I don't eat the like.
Well, fortunately, I was just doing the scouts have to all come up together, so they all decide within their patrols. So that's like a group of 4 to 8 of them, let's say. So they have to agree on what they're going to have. So they go and they make that. So basically, it's lowest common denominator. So whatever they want to agree on, and in general, they're out there. There's no moms around. There's no whatever. So it's either you eat it or you don't. So they generally eat it. That's kind of the way it rolls. You know, and if you have allergies, you have to make like different things for different folks occasionally. So you'll have some of that. But in general, they're going for the hot dogs, the hamburgers, the whatever, like the pretty basic stuff. Our guys were a little lame this time. They were like making like oatmeal and like we were doing like the pancakes and sausage and peppers. They were doing like oatmeal and like ham sandwiches. So we got a dog mount on that a little bit. Michael actually made a nice chocolate chip, sort of chocolate chip brownies, I guess. It was sort of like the chocolate chip batter put in the Dutch oven. So we cooked that out in the charcoals and stuff. So that was kind of cool. That was edible. That was quite tasty on Saturday night. So it was fun. Get to go out and have a great time. Just me and the boys, and then came back today. So not too shabby.
If you like what you see and hear, hit the subscribe or follow buttons on whatever outlet you're watching, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. It could be Spotify, it could be Apple Podcasts, and we appreciate your support and we want to continue it. We've had support for now a couple of years from FMS Graphics and Big Ed's Car Wash, fmsgraphics.com. For all your printing and promotional needs, you can hit them up online at fmsgraphics.com for all your printing and promotional needs. And if you are in the Bergen Passaic area of North Jersey, hit Big Ed's Car Wash in Fair Lawn. He's got a big tunnel, 118 feet worth, and tell him Diamond
I need to hit that
Diehard sent you.
after the camping. We did that. Truck's a little messy, a little sloppy out there.
And now that hockey season's over, the in-person shows could actually perhaps be in the offing as well.
Here we go.
We got the equipment. We got it. We're gonna do our. We were supposed to do our test run this past week, but we'll get it. We'll do it this week. And don't forget to check out our next show. Former Major Leaguer Jeff Fry will join us. You can follow him at the letter 3 J Fry FRYE on Twitter. He's a great follow, and actually he posts sometimes on our Facebook group. He posted a couple of things
today,
up there.
Yeah,
he posted a couple of things today. So we've done well by him. He's was on just over a year ago actually, and now he'll come back on and hopefully make him more of a regular as well, because he does a great job, and we appreciate that. So that'll be the next show. Once again, we thank you for your support wherever you get a chance to follow us. We would appreciate that at Diamond Diehards everywhere on social media and even on LinkedIn. So if you have any inquiries and you want to do business, or you have a veteran of the day, that's a great way to capture our attention, or pretty much anywhere. If you give us a follow, send us a message in any of those formats, we will get to it and be glad to present your veteran of the day or do some business with you. And as we head into March, Dawg, that will be, we're about a month away from the 2-year anniversary. Hopefully we can plan a couple more things and really ramp things up. Things are going pretty well for Diamond Diehard so far, and it has a lot to do with everybody jumping on and supporting us. That is going to do it for a mostly somber episode. For the Dawg, Jeff Healy, this is Joe Rizzo. Diamond Diehards is out.